Firstly, we're going to talk about the Redcap family. Now, the Redcaps are divided up into 4 creature types. Firstly, the Redcap melee squad. Secondly, the Skullchucks, the Redcap melee's ranged brothers. Thirdly, we have the Banger. This little creepy maniacal dude will sprint at the heroes like a nutter and then just detonate all in one go. He's kind of like the villain's movable mind. And then fourthly, the Lobber. He's our missile man, our artillery unit. He stands at a distance and fires an explosive projectile up into the sky, which will then rain down on the heroes, causing huge amounts of damage.
The Redcaps were the first creatures we made. They are kind of based on the creatures from European folklore, I believe.
There is an Old English legend, and there are creatures called redcaps. These were creatures in the wild, and they dipped their caps in the blood of their victims, and so became known as redcaps. But we thought, to give it a slightly more twisted, kind of fable-y view, that it would be funnier if the red on their caps was actually their own blood, because they knock nails into their own heads and into each other's heads as well. Just for sport, just to prove how hard they are and how stupid they are. The look of them started off a lot more cuddly. They were sort of small, dwarfish creatures with hairy noses and kind of mad hair, a bit like me.
They were trying to make them sort of like quite tribalistic, animalistic. Hyenas were used as an example as something that they were going to feel like scavengers, something like that. There's lots of bits, there's lots of bones, there's lots of straps, things that they've found. If they can't create anything, they're stupid. The textures are all sort of blotchy and torn and just dirty and skanky, and that's them.
When we were looking at doing the voice for these guys, we wanted to get a casting brief that summed that up. Like, we wanted that guttural sound to their voice.
Just like Steve.
Oh yeah, come on! You know, something that was quite scary and strange, as opposed to kind of screechy and screamy. So, yeah, we pushed them up north.
It's very scary there. We're from the south, so, you know, we're frightened of those characters.
At the shows, the Lobber tends to be the most used creature. People get great satisfaction from bombing their fellow heroes, especially if they're actually friends with the players.
Funny reaction at shows is always when people see Redcap bangers running towards them, because they have no idea what they are. They're these guys that are just suddenly running towards them, screaming, making weird noises.
Yeah. And worse than that is when you catch them before they start running, and they're literally standing there with their skin bubbling and boiling, and they're scratching themselves. They're so gross. And then they just start.
And then they start running at you, and people are like, "Should I kill that?" And it's like, "Yeah, kill it before it gets to you really quick." And they usually don't.
No.
The Pucks are our aggressive striker unit. When they get up close and personal, very, very dangerous. The Puck's special ability is to be able to actually turn invisible, so the villain can have a lot of fun stealthing him around and waiting to ambush the other heroes. But in fact, he doesn't even have to be invisible to be dangerous. You can see the Puck sprinting across the map at you on all fours, ready to sort of leap up and headbutt you.
Pucks, again, this goes back to ancient British folklore. They're sort of pan-like in that they've got these goat legs and they've got bare chests and they've got massive hair all over them. So to give them a little colour, a little variation, we decided to give them these Green Man type masks, which are made of wood, and they carve them themselves and decorate them, and it's basically their identity as individuals. Nobody knows what their faces look like. I should imagine they're horrific, but they might be beautiful. You never know. If you meet one, take his mask off.
He's absolutely terrifying, which is what he's supposed to be, but my God, does he scare me. That sound that he makes, that Tom's created, you know when he's around you just by that sound, that noise, and he's quite often invisible, and then he appears and he does that awful attack, and or he'll pounce on you. It's horrible. It really scares me.
I don't know how Tom made that sound, but it's so iconic to the Pucks. It's kind of this inverted vocalization that sounds like nails on a blackboard and then kind of vines and creepy. So I don't know how you've done it. How did you do that sound?
A combination of lots of different things. There's various sort of wooden creaky layers that have been put through this vowel filter, and essentially what it does is it pipes the sound through your mouth. Very dangerous if you're playing it too loud. And I'm using a similar thing with a lot of twigs and creaky wooden stuff again. So it's got an organic texture, but it feels vocal as well. And when they appear, it's sort of like the mouth opening going whoa, like that. But because it's all these sort of wooden textures, you don't really associate it with a voice, but it's still got that sort of vocal tonality to it. Just a whole sort of multi-layered, mangled thing.
Technical term.
Yeah.
So the puck can go invisible, completely invisible, but you can still see his footprints in the ground, which is pretty creepy. If you see footprints wandering around, you just run. And then he appears and kills you instantly because he's incredibly awesome. Can't tell I'm a villain player.
The claws on the floor are kind of done in a similar way to horses' hooves, and this is a bit Monty Python. You do actually use coconut shells. We had to fill them with expanding foam, and then they were left, and there was far too much expanding foam, and they turned into these vast mushroom things, which had to be trimmed down. We go into a lot of detail about the footsteps, just to sort of make sure the character's really well connected to the surface. We spent a lot of time with the hooves, just doing all these various different sounds.
We keep doing that a lot, don't we? When I was coming up with the idol, definitely took some influences from Pan's Labyrinth and stuff, and the weird hand poses and weird movements he was doing, and then contrasting that type of stuff with these weird swipe attacks and just dynamic movements where possible.
Chris was leading up the character, and we spoke about looking at goat videos because it's half goat creature. What is it, goat creature? So I looked for hours at just random goat videos of headbutting and kicking and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then he actually started looking for proper reference.
Yeah. That was just my
That's just his
downtime,
own.
sort of.
Yeah, that's just his spare time stuff.
The ogre type creature, he's kind of like the villain's mini boss. He's expensive to spawn, but he's a high damaging, powerful unit.
Now, the ogre was a creature that we were all chomping at the bit to get into Fable Legends because he's big. We've always had the traditional Fable trolls, which are made up of the landscape and whatever, but we wanted a proper, large creature for you to battle with.
So when you enter into an arena and you want to tell if there's an ogre, listen for some chatter, because if you've got good ears, you're going to hear it, and that will be the ogre talking to his brother, the noggin.
We have a concept artist called Sarah Morris, and she came up with this fantastic little story about how ogres are obviously born as twins, and they grow up into adolescence and arguing and fighting with each other, and then when they reach adolescence, they have to battle it out to the death. Well, to the death, but not quite.
The losing ogre, he's got a bit of a bad punishment waiting for him. His head is going to get ripped off and stuck on a club, and that club is then used as the surviving ogre's weapon. But because ogres are actually magical creatures, just because you've had your head ripped off doesn't mean that's a problem. No, not at all. That ogre on the club, he's going to be chatting away, giving lots of ridiculous feedback to his brother about how terrible he is at fighting and how much better he would do.
You hear that? Okay, ain't nothing over here, you stupid noggin.
The ogre has the ability to emit a horrific fart, which gives you a kind of visual green gas cloud, and it's poisonous. So if you run through there as the hero, it's going to drain your health.
I guess it wouldn't be Fable without some farting involved.
How do we make the sound of the gas cloud?
I think it's a combination of patience, Brussels sprouts, alerting other team members that, this might be the take. And, but no, I think we've used a whoopee cushion as well, because that's more controllable at least. There's various sort of gaseous releasing kind of sounds as well as sort of hissing.
Canister
so yeah,
sounds,
sort of
right.
air canistery kind of stuff. Possibly, I think there's a bicycle pump maybe in there as well, I don't know. But
That added squeak.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, there's nothing like a real
Good
sort
trump.
of trump. Yeah, exactly. You need the real thing. Nothing else will quite do it.
And then there's the boogers.
Yeah.
Or spit. I prefer boogers.
It's boogers, it's green,
Yeah, exactly.
I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's boogers. So if you get hit by the ogre boogers, then that's going to slow you right down, which means now that the ogre is super quick as well, it's even more difficult to get away from him in time, and then he's going to whack you with that club with his noggin.
He's got quite a phlegm problem. He's probably got a bit of a cold. So I was dealing with getting his spit attack to sound convincing. And again, you need something that has a sort of a level of genuine connection to the real physical thing of spitting, and I tried sort of just pretending to spit, essentially, in front of the microphone. It doesn't really sound very good.
We wanted that hack.
Yeah, you need that phlegmy sort of disgusting noise. So Steve wasn't there that day, so I went into his room and drank a lot of milk beforehand to get the
I was in my room.
No, it was in my room, of course. Steve's room sounds a lot better. So, and again, discovered that really I needed to be bringing up phlegm and spitting it into a tissue. So that's what you hear when you hear the ogre spitting, that's me hawking up greenies.
That's disgusting.
I was animating the death of the ogre. So for that one, I actually used a kind of interesting reference. So I used videos of people very drunk and falling over. Yeah, I went to all the pubs in England looking for, drunk people, but it was really difficult to find them. So I had to drink a lot myself and ask my children to record me.
Fable Legends goes back before Fable 1, so that means we've got a chance to look at some creatures that were in Fable 1 and bring them up to date in a whole new game. First one we're going to look at are the Nymphs.
Nymphs are mischievous. If there's trouble brewing, they want some of it. They're not on anybody's side.
Although they will take sides.
They will take sides, yeah. If they can harass heroes, if they can stick their oar in a little bit and cause trouble, they do. I think it was important to us to make them beautiful. Just that kind of beautiful fairy sort of influence in them.
There's a lot of influence from flowers, but also I'd say insects as well.
Stuff like dragonflies.
Yeah.
Where you get that sort of iridescent colour to
on the wings, particularly.
Stuff, on the wings, and it's like when you see a dragonfly on a summer's day. Yeah, it's a gorgeous thing. These things want to be seen. They're not really camouflage creatures. They're not sneaky creatures.
The Nymphs presented a little bit of a challenge for us to start because they're our first flying unit. So normally with a melee unit you have 4 guys running around on the ground, but the Nymphs are the first flying one. So we had some challenges there, especially around trying to get them to be a bit more dynamic in the air so that they were harder for the heroes to fight.
They're our first unit that specialises in hard to hit for ranged heroes. They're really good for the villain to use against people like Shroud and Rook.
The kind of idea now we're getting of balancing your creature loadout against the heroes that are coming in, being reactive, going, oh, okay, they've got a lot of snipers, so rather than using this big slow ogre, I'm going to use this like swarm of nymphs who flit around really quickly, are very small, present a very difficult target for people at range.
So when being shot at from a distance by a ranged hero, a nymph will magically sort of twist and disappear rapidly behind the actual ranged hero and be able to attack them. So it's a great way of actually closing in on that ranged attacker from a distance and dealing damage to that hero.
The nymph was very complicated to start with because it was our first flying character, so we didn't know exactly how to do it. We knew that it was like a homage to the Fable 1 character. So we started looking at how to make her different, how to make her more original. I had 2 options. I could either make her very cute, just like a butterfly or another flying character, or I could make her very evil. And I opted for the second option because, of course, that's much more fun.
The sound of them is down to the sort of wonderful performance that we got from our VO actors, and they were directed to start off with this sort of cutesy, babyish kind of giggly, fun kind of sound, and then very quickly they turn into these sort of horrible, malevolent, devilish kind of creatures. And the other thing we've done is did a lot of recording of different things fluttering. So I spent a lot of time in the Foley session with leaves and ballet shoes and little bits of leather and anything and everything we could find really, and just sort of shaking it very fast to get the nice wing fluttery textures.
The thing that I could see fitting with her would be a ballerina or perhaps a gymnast, because she's flying, and flying creatures normally are very regal, very majestic. So, the only humans that I can actually relate to is probably ballerinas and gymnasts. So that's basically what the nymph is. Creepy, gymnast, ballerina. She spins a lot, she attacks a lot, she does a lot of crazy moves on the air, but I think everything sells very well, and we had a lot of fun.
I think the thing I've enjoyed about the Nymphs is that so far, a lot of the creatures that we've had have all been about the weapons that they have in their hand. Sure. So very physical and up close. Whereas the Nymphs was really our first chance to do something magical with the creatures in Fable Legends.
Yeah.
So it allowed us to really think about the abilities that we were going to use and maybe put a more magical edge on it and allow us to sort of screw with the hero's perceptions, which we currently sort of didn't have much of.
Yeah, their abilities are less about directly attacking the heroes and more about trying to confuse them and mislead them.
If you weren't fighting them, you would want them on your side. You'd want to be them, really. Be great to have an nymph. That'd be fantastic. Send them off to do things.
Yeah, you never
Make
know.
your tea.
We could do that.
Yeah.
We're going to have a look at a brand new creature for Fable Legends today, the Rosewights. They're kind of really, really ancient magical wood spirits. They're not necessarily evil, I'd say. They're just kind of tied to the land, and so you get elements of being territorial with that, pushing things out in the forest, and also maybe of being manipulated by greater powers, other things at work in Albion.
Well, we want them to be quite bestial, really, and quite sort of fluid in their forms.
And not bipedal, humanoid
exactly.
sort of creature. We didn't want them to look like Ents or things that people would be familiar with as kind of tree men.
They can look very beautiful as well. They can be covered in flowers. They can be covered in thorns or flowers or anything that's around, really.
McCarthy, the concept artist, came with this really crazy concept of something that is looking really cool, the concept art, but how are we gonna transfer all these drawings into something that is 3D or real, as bones, geometry, eventually animation, and just put it in game? So yeah, they ended up being really complicated, like pretty much 200 bones, each creature. Every single root, they got like more than 25 controls that you can actually tune, create shapes. So it took a while to do RTDs just to come up with the idea of rigging that root for these guys to be able just to create animations. So they had to multiply all the roots we have, plus spines and arms and branches and foliage.
You make it sound so difficult.
It was really difficult.
The breakthrough moment with the Rosewights was when we got them in game. So we got a simple white box of the mesh and we got some simple animation going, and I remember when we first saw it in game with the decal underneath it, which was churning up the earth. We had that breakthrough moment of, right, that's how it moves. You have the helix spinning around, you have the tentacles moving, and then that decal helps bring it all together.
You know, there is a nod there to the Hollow Men from previous Fables. You know, they were a skeleton that came and attacked you, but that wasn't really what the Hollow Man was. The Hollow Man was the wisp. You know, that was its soul, and the bones were just a convenient thing to hit you with. The wisps are just kind of using whatever's there, whatever bits of the forest are appropriate to come and form an entity that will attack you. So, you know, as they burst out the ground and they're kind of grabbing different bits of tree, you know, if a hero knocks them up in the air, the roots collapse back down into the floor, and the kind of trunk flies off, and then when it lands, it grabs some new roots and pulls them back up and makes kind of a new body and carries on moving.
The special attack for the Rosewight is the underground. We wanted to keep the idea that he corkscrews, so the helix is churning around. That's how he's staying up. But then to go underground, we wanted to use that helix to really corkscrew him under. Then he's hidden. He can go anywhere. You don't know where he is. And then he corkscrews back out of the ground. Fists in the air. Bam. Smash.
first time people see them, they just panic and turn around, basically, because there's something very unsettling about them.
It's weird, like the dirt's churning up. It's like this thing is kind of rampaging towards you, just ripping through the ground. Yeah, it is a weird feeling seeing one charge at you.
One of the things that you do as a sound designer is try and recreate something in as fairly literal way as possible, and usually you try that first and then it doesn't work and you do something other which is completely unrelated. But burying a microphone in the ground and then grinding about with it, that is actually something we did. So one of the sort of the low deep layers underneath of the earth is getting this poor horribly abused microphone and just sort of grinding it about on the floor.
What I like to do is pop a gate up, okay, to trap a hero in a room, but there's no other creature inside, so they think, oh well, I've only just been locked in, I can break through this. But then you can send a Rosewight underneath the gate to actually get beneath the hero and then pop up.
Because they can burrow, there's all kinds of interesting opportunities that come up.
The voices of the Rosewights are all derived from a sort of combination of two things. There's the sound of somebody grinding a table along the floor repeatedly at various different speeds to get a nice sort of vibration tone. So it's kind of like the note of the voice is coming from a wooden sound instead of from the vocal cords. But then we've also got an actor to go and perform all of the different movements and shout a lot and get into the mind of a tree
It's important
and perform that.
Yeah, it's important that they don't sound human. Because they're vessels, they're something that a villain or an evil person inhabits to take over and then attack the hero. So it's important they don't sound too human.
Yeah, they don't sound human.
No,
they don't sound very human at all. So there's this sort of way of squeezing one sound through another. So you've basically got the sort of the vocal shape comes from the vocal performance of the actor, but the sort of the tonality and the feel of it and the sort of vibration comes from the man grinding a table across the floor repeatedly.
The Barkskin is the Rosewight equivalent of the Ogre from our last set of creatures. So he's really big, he does a lot of damage, he has a lot of health, but he costs more points for the villain, so it balances out.
It's big, it's huge, it's gigantic. It's very intimidating compared to what we have in the game right now.
We don't like it easy.
Of course not. This is for losers.
One thing we've noticed cropping up again and again on our social platforms, on Facebook, on Twitter, on the forums, people keep asking about Balverines. And right now, we can say, there's going to be Balverines! It's so exciting! They're an old favourite. Any villain player is going to be so excited to be able to put one of these down on the map and really go for those heroes.
The Balverines are obviously an iconic Fable creature. They've actually evolved quite a lot over the course of different Fable games. You look back at the Balverines in Fable 1 with their kind of blunt faces, and while there's obvious inspiration from the sort of werewolf myths, because Balverines are these transforming creatures, they weren't particularly wolf-like in the way they looked or moved or acted, and that changed a little bit over the course of the games, whereas we've wanted to roll that right back and to go, right, what does a Balverine look like in the time of legend?
This is 500 years before the first Fable, so we took them back to the drawing board a bit and thought about what they actually were, because they're men transformed into these creatures. So we had to think about what characteristics they would retain and what sort of differences there would be.
The Balverines come from this terrible creature, the Balvorn, which is a myth for the people of Albion, this horrible monster which we've never seen or know quite what it looks like, because a lot scarier that way, right? But one person managed to stop the Balvorn, but he got wounded in the process and transformed, and that was the first Balverine, and then he sort of spread the curse out from that. So this myth is very, very old, and so these creatures would be there in the time of legend.
Don't wriggle now!
They're a lot more menacing than they used to be, actually. They're a lot more bestial. I think these ones, we made them a bit sort of orangutans crossed with wild dogs. They're a really strange mishmash, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, they've got a great lurching posture, and they have got huge arms, so they look like any second they're going to spring out and attack you.
Yeah, it's that whole thing of looking like they're going to go down on all fours and rush you, like tear you to pieces.
The white Balverine is the original Balverine. You may remember this guy from the first Fable game. He's incredibly tough, he's massive, he's really hard to fight, and he's terrifying if you're a hero, or awesome to use if you're a villain.
They're much closer to the original. There's the legends of how Balverines came to exist. They're sort of the pure breeds of the bunch.
The route we've tried to take it is to put it on the same threat level as an ogre or a rose-white barkskin. When the heroes see this creature bounding across the ground, that's the moment you just go, okay, what are we going to do about this? Because they're fast, a lot faster than an ogre and a barkskin, but just as powerful and as deadly.
For the voice, we use this microphone which records sounds which are above the normal range of human hearing. Usually they're used for recording bats and things like that. When you take the sound that you've recorded and slow it down, all of the higher frequency stuff that you normally can't hear is in the hearing range. We've had someone do all this sort of wolfy, snarly kind of business at twice the speed and then slowing it down to get this really monstrous kind of effect.
It sounds imposing.
It sounds imposing
Scary.
and frightening, and it's horrible. That's good.
The Balverines have a roar attack, and if you're standing in front of them and you're hit by this roar, then you get slowed, and you've got like sticky saliva on you.
It's pretty gross.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. Yeah, the drool everywhere.
Yeah.
They also have a new feature of our creatures which they can go up ledges. So this was actually Ryan's idea.
It was actually my idea, yeah.
Yep, they can jump up ledges, great for the villain, because if the hero has to run all the way around, Balverine can just jump up, ambush them before they even get to the top.
Yeah.
So like with all of our creatures, they're twofold now. We have a creature that a hero needs to engage with, but also on the flip side, something that the villain has to be able to control. So we've tried to keep and maintain a lot of the classic behaviours that you associate with the Balverines, you know, leaping up and down, landing behind heroes and thinking, okay, how can we still keep that, but give the villain the control of this? So we decided to give the Balverine as its special ability, the ability for the villain to target a location and then they leap up into the air and they land down. We kind of describe it a little bit similar to the Redcap artillery, except it's a Balverine falling from the sky as opposed to a missile, which is just as intimidating for a hero. Suddenly you're running towards them, you can see them standing there, this little flight figure, and then they crouch down and leap up. You go, oh God, where have they gone? Where have they gone? And usually the villain will put them right behind you, or he's hidden them behind a bush. It's this real sense of, I don't know where the hell they have just gone. And it's got quite a fearful moment when you're playing as a hero.
I remember playing the original Fable games and Balverines being kind of terrifying. I really kind of hated them. Whenever I'd come up against them, I dreaded it. And to think that I'm going to be the villain controlling those creatures against those players who are going to be dreading them.
It's a good twist on it.
Super exciting.
It's been exciting to try and bring the Balverine back and update it, trying to get that right. That's been really exciting to really sort of see how far we can push this creature.